members from the public. I will go around and ask everyone to identify themselves shortly for the record, because hopefully we're going to have a lot of participation today. So as a preliminary matter, this is, excuse me, Brian Sullivan. Oh, wait, I didn't ask Eleanor if she was ready. Eleanor, are you ready?
She just came on, Brian.
Okay. Eleanor, let me know when you're ready for me to start.
Can you hear me?
Now I can.
It takes like 8 clicks to get that thing to unmute. I am ready. Yes, thank you.
Okay, great. As a preliminary matter, this is Brian Sullivan, the chair of the Nantucket Affordable Housing Trust. Permit me to confirm that all members and persons anticipated on the agenda are here and present, can hear me. Members, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Nina Sherry.
Aye.
Allison Mitchell.
Aye.
Dave Iverson.
Aye.
Brooke Moore.
Aye.
Christy Ferrantella.
Aye.
I do believe that we're expecting Penny later in the meeting. Staff, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Tucker Holland.
Aye.
Ken Bogrand.
Here.
Eleanor Antonetti.
Here, and could I ask the people who, and maybe Tucker, you can rename them because I don't have co-host. Is BW Perry Mickey or Megan or Bruce? And who's NHA? I know Julia is Julia Linder. I see Tobias. Just for the minutes, I need, you know, and for people who watch this after the fact, if your name isn't on your screen, it should be.
Eleanor, this is Mickey.
Mickey, okay. And who's NHA?
Renee Seeley.
Renee. Thank you. And
We have a sailor who's not identified. We have a green sailor.
It's Liz Bremski.
Oh, hey. Awesome.
Hi.
Great. So let me work my way through this. Anticipated speakers on the agenda, please respond in the affirmative. Julia Lindner.
Here.
Okay, great. The other members of the public that are not listed on the agenda, but I do expect in conversation, Ann Kuspa.
Yes, here.
Ann's from Housing Nantucket. I see Curtis Barnes just joined. Curtis, can you hear us? Hearing nothing from Curtis, I'll move on. Tobias Glidden.
I'm here.
Thank you. Are you here as part of any organization, or will you be joining the presentation?
Yeah, I'd like to join the conversation with Act Now.
Okay, great. Thank you. We've heard from Renee, Mickey, and Susan Campese, so I think we're through that aspect. This open meeting of the Nantucket Affordable Housing Trust is being conducted remotely, consistent with Governor Baker's executive order of March 12, 2020, due to the current state of emergency in the Commonwealth due to the outbreak of COVID-19 virus. In order to mitigate the transmission of COVID-19, we have been advised and directed by the Commonwealth to suspend public gatherings, and as such, the governor's order suspends the requirement of open meeting law to have all meetings in a publicly accessible physical location. Furthermore, all members and public bodies are allowed and encouraged to participate remotely. The order, which you can find posted with the agenda materials for this meeting, allows public bodies to meet entirely remotely so long as reasonable public access is afforded so that the public can follow along with the deliberations of the meeting. Ensuring public access does not ensure public participation unless such participation is required by law. This meeting will feature public comment to those members of the public body that have joined the meeting via Zoom. For this meeting, the Nantucket Affordable Housing Trust is convening by video conference via the Zoom app as posted on the town's website, identifying how the public may join. Please note this meeting is being recorded and that all attendees are participating by video conference. Accordingly, please be aware that other folks may be able to see you, and take care not to screen share your computer. Anything you broadcast may be captured in the recording. All supporting materials that have been provided to members of this body are on the town's website unless otherwise noted. The public is encouraged to follow along using the posted agenda unless I, the chair, notes otherwise. We will now turn to the first agenda item. Before I do so, please permit me to cover some ground rules for an effective, clear conduct of our business to ensure accurate meeting minutes. I, the chair, will introduce each speaker on the agenda. After they conclude their remarks, the chair will go down the line of members, inviting each by name to provide any comment, questions, or motions. Please hold until your name is called. Further, remember to mute your computer or phone when you are not speaking. Remember to speak clearly and always in a way that helps generate accurate meeting minutes. For any response, please wait until the chair leads the floor to you and state your name before speaking. If members wish to engage in conversation with other members, please do so through the chair, taking care to identify yourself. For items that have public comment after the members have spoken, the chair will afford the public comment as follows. Comment to those members of the public that have joined the meeting via Zoom. Members of the public who wish to speak must state their names and be acknowledged and speak through the chair. Finally, each vote will be taken via roll call. The one person I don't think I identified at the beginning was Mr. Dickler. Can you hear us today?
I can. Thank
Great,
you.
Thank you. Okay. Forgive me while I get the right agenda up. So item number 2 on the agenda, I'm looking for a motion to approve today's agenda.
So moved. Second.
So that's moved by Rima, second by Christy. By roll call, Rima Sherry,
Aye.
Dave Iverson,
Aye.
Christy Parentella,
Aye.
Brooke Moore,
Aye.
and Allison Mitchell.
Aye.
And you,
Oh, and Brian Sullivan, aye. Oh,
you go last.
so Penny Dye has just joined the meeting as we enter item number 3. Penny, can you hear us? That's a head shake affirmative. Yes, Eleanor. Item number 3, looking for an approval of the minutes from December 15th. Is there any conversation? Seeing none, I'm looking for a motion.
So
Move
moved.
to approve.
So motion by Brooke, second from Dave. By roll call, Rima,
Aye.
Allison Mitchell,
Aye.
Dave Iverson,
Aye.
Brooke Moore,
Aye.
Christy Parentella,
Aye.
Penny Dye,
Aye.
and Brian Sullivan, aye. Item number 4, we're going to move into an update on the housing production plan, specifically 2 items related to webinars. The first being January 12th from 4 to 6 p.m. Tucker, would you like to elaborate on this?
Sure. Thanks, Mr. Chair. Yes, as the trust members know, we have a webinar, the first of 2 scheduled for next Tuesday at 4 o'clock. This will be run by Judy Barrett and Jen Goldson, our housing production plan consultants. It will be live broadcast on NCTV 18 and available for viewing. Following that, it would appear like there will be a story in the INM this week about it, as well as an ad that we're planning to run. And so I've circulated actually a draft of that ad to you all. We just received it this morning, but if you had any comments on that, it would be great to collect those. You can either make them now, or if you simply wanted to shoot me an email, we will incorporate those and the ad will run this week. But we're very excited to be kicking off this process. I'll also mention that there is going to be a community-wide survey that will be going out in conjunction with this webinar next week, and that will be open for several weeks. It will be translated into both Spanish and Portuguese, and we're hoping to have broad and strong participation in that survey.
Tucker, while we have so many members of the public here, could you just do a very high level of why we're doing the HPP, when it needs to be issued, and who it's being sent to?
Sure. So technically, every municipality in the Commonwealth is required to have a housing production plan. Not every municipality does. The trust actually updated the town of Nantucket's housing production plan 5 years ago. They last 4 or 5 years, and then they were required to be updated again. So our present housing production plan runs until October of 2021. So we have been planning for a while to conduct this process and submit our new plan approximately in May, so that that might be approved well in advance of the current plan expiring. Basically, a housing production plan, there are many benefits to it, but two of the principal ones are it's really a roadmap for the community on how to address its year-round need, year-round housing need, and as well, if you have an approved housing production plan relative to Chapter 40B, it cuts in half the required number of units you need to get a year of safe harbor on your way to meeting the 10% state requirement. So it's what I guess I would emphasize just at the end here that, you know, this is a community product. So it's very important that we hear from, you know, I'll optimistically say, you know, from every member of the community. I mean, we want to hear every voice who's willing to share theirs with us, you know, on this topic. You know, the only way we're going to, you know, find success in the end is, you know, if we're all involved. So we really encourage people to take the survey, participate in the webinars, attend the meetings, the trust meetings, and provide feedback. There'll be a number of opportunities for folks to give their thoughts. You mentioned the second webinar in the spring, and you know, we'll get more into that, but in March will be the opportunity where the consultants will have put together with the trust their draft recommendations, if you will, for the plan. And so we'll be looking for feedback on those before the plan goes to both the planning board and the select board on its way to being submitted to the state.
Great, thank you, Tucker.
Did you mean planning board or I'm sorry to interrupt. Did you mean planning board or MPDC?
I believe it's the planning board, but we'll double check that.
Rima, from her experience, is shaking her head, yes, planning board. Is there any board comments on the ad that Tucker was able to distribute at this time? Brooke?
Something bold that says your opportunity or get your voice heard on housing, something like catchy at the top. So that it's a lot of words.
Okay, thank you. Rima?
Yeah, I think that it can be pared down. It is a lot of words. I think that it should also say that this is an update, not a creation of a plan. So I will go over it later and see if we can pare it down. But I also agree with Brooke, since it's an advertisement, it's a good opportunity to let people know this is something they can get involved in and have their voices heard or learn, you know, to start. So, you know, encourage participation.
Great, thank you. Christy?
Thank you. I'm wondering if it's possible to do a shorter URL or a QR code just to make it easier for people to register for the Zoom link, just to encourage participation.
You see Tucker diligently taking notes, great. Any other comments from the board? Dave?
Just, I completely agree with all the comments made, and I think it's important that the important information is able to be picked up just in a glance, because a lot of people just advertising in the paper, there's so many of them, they get lost in the mix. I think you need to be able to get the basics of it in just a glance and then draw them in to read it. But if it's just the small print like that, people are probably going to pass by it.
Great, thank you, Dave. Allison or Penny? Penny's good, Allison's good, great. My only other comment is if we're driving traffic to a website or a location, if there's an opportunity to post the existing HPP plan so people can find that easily to be able to review it, to understand what is going into the next step. Rima?
That is available on our website, the trust website, in documents, easy to find.
Great. Okay, so if there's nothing else on the ad, we'll move on to that. Tucker, I know that there is a general question circulated from a member of the public, is will there be an agenda sent out prior from Jen, who will be running the meeting? So hopefully we can publish that as early as possible, or if people want to, that are joining the call today, check in with Tucker or Eleanor leading up to the meeting. We don't know when we'll get it, but we'll share any documents that we can.
Yeah, I just so you know, Mr. Chair, I sent a note to Jen asking if she, typically would have a deck that would be available beforehand, and if she does, we will definitely make it available, and if she doesn't, we'll all see what she has to share that day.
Great, thank you, Tucker. Any more commentary on this agenda item? Is there anything we want to touch base about the March sub item? Not at this time. Okay, so we'll close item number 4 and move to item number 5. It's pages 13 through 27. The RFP's update and approval.
Excuse me, may I ask who Justin is? It just says Justin. Ugh. Anybody know?
Justin,
Do not know.
I guess.
Who do you think, Dave?
Justin Quinn.
And there's Mr. Hoey and Megan. I'm trying to keep track of this. This is getting to be a busy screen, so I'm trying to keep track of all the people here.
It is Justin. I don't
Justin.
know why he's texting me and not speaking up, but it's Justin.
Okay, could you say his last name again, Dave? I'm sorry.
Quinn, Quinn.
Yes, okay, I remember. He got, okay. Megan?
And you have Anna Day has joined,
Yeah, I saw that.
and there's a Megan. I'm not sure Megan's last name.
Megan Perry, I'm sure. And Mr. Hoey. Thank you. Sorry to interrupt.
No, please. Moving on to item number 5. Tucker, do you want to update the board?
Sure. So as the board will recall, we had sent out an RFP at the end of last summer, was open for a couple months. It was heavily promoted, advertised, and responses were due at the end of October. And this is under the Neighborhood First program. And it was intended to, in effect, catch proposals that might run across all 3 of the Neighborhood First Advisory Committee recommended strategies, which were adopted by the Trust Board as well as the Select Board. And so there was a very limited response to that RFP. And so the Trust has talked about reissuing a new RFP to see if we might not catch more interest, if you will, but also that we are planning to target these RFPs toward each of the individual strategies. And that might actually make it a little easier for folks, each of the types of proposers, to respond. And so what's included today is the RFP aimed toward what we call the pocket development, or I should say the Neighborhood First Advisory Committee called the pocket development strategy. At the meeting on the 19th, we will be looking at the RFP for what's called the dispersed site purchases and development strategy, and so forth. So today I was principally interested in any comments that you all might have to the draft RFP that is included in the packet. And our intent is to take those comments, make those adjustments to the document, and for the procurement department to issue this next week. So.
Great. Thank you, Tucker. By a show of hands and members of the board, are there questions, comments, thoughts? Okay, seeing none, I think that the board has spent a fair amount of time on this. Since we do have a significant public group, I will open for public questions or comments. If you'd like to have a question or make a comment, if you turn your screen on and raise your hand so I can identify you. Okay, seeing no action from my end. Tucker, I think we'll be looking for, you're looking for a motion to approve and send to procurement?
Yeah, if there could be a motion to, approve the RFP as drafted, subject to any, final revisions from town council, procurement and staff, then I think we're good to launch this.
Brooke?
I am happy to make that motion as articulated by Tucker.
Thank you. Eleanor, do you need any of that? You're good? I'm looking for a second on Brooke's motion.
Second.
Second from Rima Sherry. A vote by roll call. Rima Sherry.
Aye.
Allison Mitchell.
Aye.
Dave Iverson.
Aye.
Brooke Moore.
Aye.
Christy Ferrantella.
Aye.
Penny Dye.
Aye.
And Brian Sullivan, aye. Okay, great. Thank you. Sorry, I have too many windows open. I think that was item 5. Moving to item 6. Pages 29 through 35 of the packet, 7 Amelia Drive, preliminary discussion. Tucker, I'll open this to you to kind of identify.
Sure, thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'll, with a big group here today and a special presentation, I don't want to take a lot of time with respect to this, but I just wanted to put on the radar. As the trust knows, we acquired jointly with the town a vacant property at 7 Amelia Drive last year. This has always been intended to provide on part of the lot a connector between Amelia Drive and the forthcoming Waite Drive. But there is approximately 2/3 of the lot that is available to the trust in order to develop housing. And so we recently have been approached by the land bank, actually, in connection with an acquisition they recently made of the Roland property on Commercial Wharf, and they are willing to donate that building as well as the expense of the move if we had an interest in receiving this building. Ken and I have had a chance to walk through it with Jesse Bell, and it's in quite good condition. It really would be, I think, fantastic if it were able to be moved and if it worked with that site. And so we have reached out to Matt McEachran, who has agreed to help us assess the site, for such a move, and we'll be back with more information. But we just wanted to get an initial feeling from the trust whether you all felt this was a good opportunity.
Tucker, can you identify for me just the bedroom count and dwelling size?
Yeah, so this building, it has, it's basically set up presently as office space on the first floor, and then a one-bedroom apartment with loft on the second floor. And so, I think we would be looking at, in terms of this building, certainly using the existing residential apartment. I guess we, at some point we'll have a discussion about whether we would convert the first floor to pure residential, or whether there was like a commercial office use for that space, whether there might be a below ground apartment. And then we would, have a second dwelling. We can have up to 4 apartment style units on that site. And that's what Matt is in part helping us assess as to, how it might work cohesively and what's possible there.
Great. So I'd just like to thank the Land Bank for the opportunity. I think it's really excellent that they brought the building and are willing to make the donation of the move cost. So thank you. Open to the board for questions by show of hands. If Rima.
I had to unmute. Did you notice the ceiling heights? I think I've been in that building before. Did it seem like small ceiling heights or normal on the first floor?
I'll let Ken comment as well. I did not notice low ceiling heights on the first and in the office level and the main apartment level. The ceiling in the loft area is, it's in the peak. It is funky, but for the normal space, it felt very adequate.
And we had initially talked about the possibility of doing a combination of commercial space and residential space on that property. So this fits that bill really nicely, I think.
Any other board members, thoughts, questions? Tucker, my thought is I would challenge Matt. As you mentioned, the zoning in that neighborhood does allow for the 4 units to be created, and moving this building there, would that become a hindrance to being able to create the other 3? If that is the case, is there an opportunity that exists in the marketplace that we could move this to a covenant lot in a different location? Could we purchase a covenant lot and then turn this into an 80% unit? It sounds like the structure itself will work well as a freestanding unit, whereas we may be forcing the opportunity onto Amelia. I'd just like to kind of open up the scope of how we're thinking about the building and the total unit count. I'd love to figure out a way to repurpose it somewhere.
Yeah, totally agree. And so if, we do not want to sacrifice the unit count in order to use this building. So if it doesn't fit properly and we can't achieve exactly what you're saying, Ryan, then totally agree. Maybe there's another site that it would be appropriate for.
I don't know if not for now, but maybe response via email, if Housing Nantucket could identify to us any covenant lots that they're aware of, that are kind of in the works, or other opportunities that we could make sure that this building properly gets repurposed, it would be great. Give me just 1 second, and I'm just going to finish with the board members. I'll come back to you. Brooke, you had?
Yeah, so my comment would be that I would very much appreciate if the land bank had some flexibility in terms of timing on this, to make sure that we find the right spot for this building. Having watched a house that I tried to have moved from a donation from out in Tom Nevers this summer be demolished in the end, because the timing of the homeowners versus our capacity to find the appropriate location to move a perfectly good house was disappointing. So I'm hoping there's some flexibility in timing, so we can work out the details on this. But I love the idea of repurposing a building that is in good condition.
Tucker?
Yeah, I don't want to not mention, I mean, the timing is a factor for them. They're hoping to have this moved by next summer. And there is, I think there's actually a growing list of people who would take it. It's a beautiful building. It really should be repurposed. So I think they're kind of looking to us to say, like, they'll work with us, but I think they're looking to us to, in relatively short order, make a determination whether we can use it or can't use it. And so we're actively working on that.
Penny?
Yeah, just a quick question for Tucker. You said next summer. Do you mean this summer?
Yeah, I do. Yes.
Okay.
Any more board comments? Anne?
Hi, Ann Crispa, Housing Nantucket. We were offered the building, and very pleased to have gotten that direct contact from the land bank, so I appreciate that. I know it needs to get cut. It's a very tall building. We had to say no because we think that the cost to move the building and then cut it, put it back together, didn't really meet the needs of an affordable housing development. So there's also a lot of wires on Commercial Wharf there. It looked like a difficult house move, so that's why we declined it. But I'm happy to work with Tucker because we do have a lot of experience moving houses. If it is something you wanted to pursue, I can share our experiences with house moves too.
Great. And thank you very much. So are there any other members of the public that want to discuss this? Seeing none. Tucker, you'll be coming back to us after the meeting with the architect?
Yeah, hopefully at the meeting on the 19th, we'll be able to talk about this a little further.
Great. To your point about presentations, let's close this item and move to item number 7, financial discussion that you'd like to lead the group through.
Yeah, actually,
these are pages 29 through 35 for anyone following along in the agenda packet.
Sorry, Brad, I'm just pulling this up.
Don't be sorry.
Excuse me, I don't think it is 29 through 30, not in my packet.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm looking at the wrong.
It actually isn't in my packet. We jumped from Amelia Drive to Act Now.
There was nothing for this in the packet.
Yeah, that's what I was double checking here.
Sorry.
No, I mean, this was meant really for the, as the trust knows, we're working with town administration and the select board on funding, for this year and future years. And so, this is, what we wanted to do is to get the trust input on a couple of different areas. I mean, as you all know, the trust was awarded roughly $25 million, plus some other grants over the course of the last few years to be addressing the housing need. In particular, I think at the forefront has been an interest in the town getting into safe harbor with respect to 40B, which everyone knows we have, and to maintaining our status in safe harbor on our way to the 10%, meeting the 10% requirement. And so, as the trust knows, there have been several efforts, commitments in this area to do just that. But what we are thinking about as we look forward is what financial resources are we going to need in order to meet some of the further objectives that cannot be fully met with the 25 million plus as we continue to march along toward that 10% requirement. So, for example, Ken and I are looking for input on the trust members' views regarding how we might view subsidy in a particular development. So, for example, 137 Orange Street, which pretty universally is felt to be a great location for year-round housing. If we are thinking about, for example, developing 24 units there, the site allows up to 32, but for this exercise, we'll say 24. How the project actually gets funded and developed at affordable levels is material to what our financial needs are. So if we said we wanted to do something in the Six Fairgrounds model, for example, where we said, well, we're going to contribute to the land, but otherwise it's on a developer, whether that be a nonprofit or private for-profit developer, it's going to be on their shoulders to finance the construction and operations. Then really the only financing vehicle that would potentially make it all work is through the low-income housing tax credit program. And the challenge, if you will, with that program is it takes 20 units in order to reach the threshold where you would be considered for an award. So if we're talking about doing roughly 24 units there, which equates to a year of safe harbor for Nantucket, then pretty much the entire development would have to be units that qualified for low-income housing tax credits. And that basically means units that are restricted at the 60% area median income level and less. So I think one of the things that we need to talk about as a group is, are we interested in that type of model from both a need but also financing perspective, or are we more interested in developing mixed income properties? And if the answer were to be the latter, then that's going to take local subsidy to make it happen. So, you know, in the case of Six Fairgrounds, you know, the tax credits would be contributing on the order of, you know, of $12 million toward that development. And it, again, it works there because there's 64 units. You can have 20 of them restricted at this level and still have a mixed income project with 110% and even market rates included. So, and they all qualify for the SHI list. So the approach that we are going to have to developing Orange Street, developing at some point the old fire station location, and others that we've talked about. This is pretty central to the kind of funding that we're going to need to understand what the trust view is. And secondly, you know, as well, if we want to implement a down payment assistance program, which is something that we've talked about, you know, one of Beth Ann Meehan has given some feedback in terms of, you know, someone who sees a lot of the mortgage activity here for year-rounders and what type of need there might be for down payment assistance. And in round numbers, you know, she's suggesting something on the order of 100,000, you know, per unit. So if we, for example, wanted to help 100 families, you know, it's going to take $10 million worth of firepower. So I'm going to just let Ken add anything he would like to add and then turn it over to you all.
Thank you. Ken?
Thanks, Tucker. Part of what we are sort of working our way through is to, we have $25 million that we have pretty much figured out a way to spend fairly quickly. But part of what needs to be done is that the units that we have acquired need to be built out. And I think that the model that we're looking at is to have them all be in different levels within the community, so that we can address the different levels of requirement within the community. And so that suggests to me that you know, if we're looking at, for instance, say the 31 Orange Street properties, that probably suggests that we're going to need anywhere from $5 to $8 million to help build that out. Maybe I may be a little bit low, I may be a little bit high, but that's money that if we want to do it right in terms of having it available to across the board eligibility with respect to the nature of our community, that's funding that we need to figure out where it's going to come from. And so that's part of the planning that we're thinking about needs to be done in terms of, we recognize that the amount of money that we have, but if we're looking at really finishing off what we started with respect to some of these projects, we need to figure out how and where we're going to get the additional funding from in order to do that out over the next 3 to 5 years to get to our 10%. So that's part of what Tucker and I are looking to try and get input from you as a board on, with respect to a belief that that approach relative to trying to create something that fits in all different economic stretches across the board, from the 60% to the 150% in some instances, is appropriate for us to try and structure relative to what we're building for the community, and then the nature of potential sources for that as we think about what we have to do over the next 3 to 5 years to achieve safe harbor.
Thank you, Ken. So now we'll work our way through board for board questions and comments. Penny, I see that you've raised your hand.
Yeah, I just, I feel like we need a lot more discussion about our role in terms of building these things out, because my understanding was we were going to be bidding these out to a developer for construction. We're not going to be building, are we?
No, we're not planning to be the developer, but the question will be the subsidy required for that developer or the nonprofit who is actually building them out. And if we, for example, didn't want Orange Street to be a tax credit project and therefore almost exclusively 60% AMI or less, then we as a town likely would need to provide subsidy to provide the affordability levels that we would want.
So you're talking about the town stepping in and acting in lieu of the state tax credits?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay,
So-
and that's a town decision, is it not?
I
mean, that's not our decision.
Well, the town would look at the trust to be funding that type of activity.
It would be our recommendation, Penny, to the Board of Selectmen.
Select board, yeah.
Select Board, thank you. So Tucker, for me, the question comes down to time management of maintaining safe harbor. If without question, there is a need in our community that runs from 60% to 200%. And we could never create enough units across the full spectrum to satisfy all the need. There's just not enough available land. So if we step back and talk about time management of the SHI list, what is a realistic expectation of working through a tax credit project, assuming there is not a legal holdup? Best case scenario, what does that look like? And when would we be producing units on a comprehensive plan to qualify for safe harbor, making those SHI qualified safe harbor?
So that's a great question. So, I mean, this is sort of how it looks. So Six Fairgrounds has now gone through all of the legal rigmarole and is cleared for applying for the tax credits. Normally with tax credits, because they're very competitive within the state, the state gets an allocation from the federal government, and then the state determines what projects get an allocation. And so normally a project would apply for tax credits in year one. It would not receive an award unless it was a very, unless it was an unusual circumstance. But normally it takes 2 applications to receive an award. So and
it's at the time of the award that the project then qualifies to be SHI units?
That's correct. That is my understanding, is that it is the award letter that is sort of the magic date of when they count.
Okay.
So in the case of Six Fairgrounds, they applied once at the very beginning, even though the project had been appealed. But once it was apparent that the appeal issue could not be resolved outside of the court system with the neighbors, the state is not going to give an award. They're only going to give award to a shovel-ready project. So something that's being held up legally won't get an award. So, but it did actually check the box of, we've gone through this once. So the project submitted for during the pre-application round in the fall, is invited to submit into the regular round this winter. There certainly is no guarantee, but let's say the body language is inspiring cautious optimism that it will get an award this go round. I think that the fact that we got the MassWorks award for the construction of Waite Drive, hopefully is a good harbinger, of the state recognizing the importance of this project. So, what will happen if you assume that it does get an award? It might get an award in May of this year. And when it might get an award in July of this year. Whenever it gets an award, that is the point at which the units count. And in this case, it would contribute a new 2-year period of safe harbor. So we would have that 2-year period. So what we would be doing if we wanted to do Orange Street as a tax credit project is put it out maybe in similar manner as the Six Fairgrounds RFP, and identify a developer and go through the the permitting processes and so forth. And if everything went just right, like you might be able to have it timed to, coincide with the end of the 2-year period that Six Fairgrounds would be giving. It would have to be everything went right. Like I mentioned before, these are very competitive. And so one thing we don't know is if Nantucket gets a sizable allocation, an award this coming year or this year, would it get an award again, 2 years later? I think that might be optimistic as well. So to do projects that are exclusively reliant on the tax credit program to maintain safe harbor it would be challenge. It'd be rolling the dice a little bit. Did that answer your question?
It does answer my question. I will point out though that based on the number of units needed to apply for a tax credit project, does Nantucket, in general, over the next 20-year span, see opportunities to have 20 units in one project again? So that I would want to take into consideration as we think about this site and what it offers in the opportunity of flexibility. That's my thought. Open to the rest of the board. By a show of hands, any questions or comments, Brooke?
I think the way I look at this is in terms of the idea of funding the trust is that we don't know what the landscape is going to look like 6 months from now, a year from now, 2 years from now. And in order for us to adequately have enough ammo to be able to respond to whatever these multitude of factors that weigh into how we put together a project, how we finance it, how it gets subsidized, how large it is, where the land is available for purchase. Without a steady funding stream, our hands are tied behind our backs, right? So we could go through this process of deciding that this Orange Street development is a good tax credit opportunity, right? And we structure it that way, and it's 20 units or 24 units, and 20 of them are at 60%, and maybe even some at 30% AMI, right? Because we can do some very low income units within that tax credit. And there's certainly a market for that. And the question we have is, our strategy has been to have mixed level income pocket developments. The problem is with a 24 unit development, matching it with LIHTC financing means you are skewing the pricing at the lower end. And there may be a good reason to do that in that location because transportation's available, it's walkable to the grocery store, it's across the street from Landmark. There's a lot of good reasons why that might be a good spot to focus and concentrate 60% and below units. However, we have the wild card of will the state even issue that tax credit for that? So having a steady funding stream allows us to be more flexible as the landscape changes over time, as we get, hear the body language from DHCD on tax credits, listen to the community about what is a priority and what's needed. And so that we have the option 2 years from now to have tried the LIHTC route and be able to shift gears because we know we have the funding to subsidize something that looks a little different if we have to based on what happens down the road. So as much as I love the idea of mixed income multi-unit development, I also don't want to preclude ourselves from utilizing LIHTC, backing ourselves into a corner by saying we have to be at multiple levels of income in a location. However, if we don't have money in the bank, we don't have those options. And to put all of our eggs in the basket of LIHTC is risky. And again, that's why I'm supporting a steady funding stream for the trust and to allow us the flexibility to not have to force ourselves into LIHTC when it's not appropriate. And that's it.
Thanks, Brooke. Any more conversation on this site and kind of the general direction? Dave?
No, I mean, I just with what Brooke said, I think that if we go down that path, we really risk creating, a much greater need in, as Tucker would say, the missing middle, or kind of those which are very much needed here, is those anything above 80 is needed almost as much as the things below 80. So I just think that with a proper funding stream, we can address every level.
Thank you, Dave. Anyone else on the board? Rima?
I think relying on tax credits puts us in jeopardy as far as safe harbor, because it's going to slow down projects a lot. And like Brooke said, there are places where it's probably more appropriate than other places, but we're a fund, we need funding. And, that's been my refrain for the past 5 years, so.
Thank you, Rima. Allison?
Yeah, I just, I know we're talking about one site specifically right now, but I think that this is an excellent opportunity to really hone in and develop on kind of an operational plan for when these things come along again. Because even when we do get, and fingers crossed, we do get good, funding, it would be nice if moving forward, we could grab up opportunities like buying up Orange Street or buying things like that, and then kind of knowing what the path was. And so just like you said, Brooke, and Rima, if a tax credit made sense, we'd say, great, that's what we'd like to try out first. But maybe that's not our only option, and we kind of have a nice blueprint for the direction that we head when we can, grab up these opportunities.
I think Christy and Penny are the only two that I haven't heard from any commentary or. Nope. Okay. Tucker, do you have what you were looking for there?
This has been helpful. We have a preliminary discussion with Libby, Brian Turbot, Christy, Ken, and myself this Thursday that this discussion will aid us in having that initial discussion. And I'm sure we'll talk about this topic again at our meeting on the 19th.
Yeah, I think from my perspective, I think it really plays into what are the other projects in the timing role, and does this project need to be ready in 2 years or 4 to 6 years? And if it's a 4 to 6, I would love to see try and take the opportunity at the LIHTC credits. I don't know that there's a significant design difference in what is built, working with the planning board and the HDC, et cetera, versus the opportunity to apply. That's just my board member 2 cents.
I think that if I just can add, I mean, I think Rima kind of hit the nail on the head that that this Orange Street is just an example property, but that could be an ideal candidate, for LIHTC. But as far as Safe Harbor goes, I'm not sure that we want to rely on LIHTC to be providing that when we want it.
Okay, great.
Hey, Brian.
Brooke, go ahead.
I just want to rephrase what Tucker said, when we need it for safe harbor purposes, not necessarily when we want it, because this is something we need to do.
Okay, great. Thank you, everybody. So does that complete the points that you wanted to make today in that item? So we'll close item 7, move to item 8. This is a presentation from the Act Now group. We have Julia Lindner and Tobias Glidden. I will turn over to Julia for her presentation. Thank you for joining us today.
Hi, Brian. Can you hear me properly?
Yes.
Great, thank you. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for giving me and Tobias the opportunity to come before you. I'm going to try, I know there's a lot of material to cover, and I'm going to try to make it as brief as possible. I'm just going to share my screen quickly. So I'm going to give you a bit of background before I get into what Act Now is actually proposing, which is, a licensing bylaw for short-term rentals on the island. So the backbone of all of our research is that there's really a connection between investor-owned short-term rentals and the housing crisis. So I'm hoping that I can show you the concrete information that we've gathered, and that if you have any questions, you'll let me know. Please stop me anytime if I'm not being clear on something. Since this is the first time that we actually present in front of you, I thought I'd give you a tiny bit of background. Most of you know who Act Now is at this point, but we're still pretty new in the community. So our mission is to inspire the change needed to protect what the community loves about the island. A lot goes into that, but I'll give you a little bit of tidbit on our focus areas. And we've got a board of directors that is a majority of year-round residents, and that is going to remain a priority going forward as we add new members. Small staff team that's growing, but it'll likely stay quite small. So the areas of focus for us really are growth management, year-round housing, and transportation. So believe it or not, we're not only working on short-term rentals. There's actually other stuff we're working on, and I hope to be able to share those with you in the coming weeks and months. And that very much includes housing. And when we think about housing, I think that there's been a lot of great momentum, certainly in the affordable housing. You guys have done a tremendous job, light years from where we were just a couple of years ago. Where we're hoping to help work on the problem and the solutions is really on the middle income, where mid-priced year-round homes are really disappearing. I'm going to show you some of the numbers that you guys are already somewhat familiar with, but that's where we're hoping to bring something to the table and working with the other groups that are already there. So our first area of research as an organization really was short-term rentals. And the reality is we have some great new information, right? We have a registry that's been in place since 2019. Compliance has been growing. So, we typically go to the state requesting the registry every couple months. And every time we get an updated registry, the number goes up. So the first time about 6 months ago, we had, I think it was 1,800 short-term rentals. The last time I looked at the numbers, this was from December 31st, we're up to 2,200, actually over 2,200 short-term rentals. And that represents about 20% of the housing stock. And of course, some year-rounders love to rent part of their home. It's part of how they can afford a house. But in reality, when we go through the registry, we see that 80% of the short-term rentals that are registered are owned by people or companies that are off island, that are based off island. And then, when you look through the registry, there really isn't too much information, right? It tells you it tells you the address, it tells you the name of the person who's registering the property. And then it tells you whether that owner has multiple short-term rentals in Nantucket. And that's related to the community impact fee. If Nantucket decided to opt for the community impact fee, which, as you know, is sort of an add-on to the local, to the short-term rental tax, then the state would tax only those properties that are owned by owners who have multiple in one municipality. So on Nantucket, we have 370 short-term rentals that are owned by owners who have multiple. So they're part of like a mini portfolio, if you like. Of course, then we also have a bunch of one-offs that are, somebody might have multiple, they might have only one here, but they might have 3 on the Cape or something like that. That would be captured in that number. And so, we do see, and this is what's really alarming, is that there's a growing presence of investors, companies, and vacation clubs that are coming into the market. And really, if you think about Airbnb, you saw the IPO just a couple of weeks ago. Airbnb started in 2008, really didn't explode until a few years ago. And it's made everything just so much easier, right? So this is not a Nantucket specific. I think that Nantucket, has always had vacation rentals, and it's actually worked out really well for the longest time. But really, Airbnb and low interest rates and real estate being a pretty good classification of investment has really generated a ton of demand from investors saying, where do I start a short-term rental business? And Nantucket, like many other desirable places, has been the place to be. So, what's the problem with that? Because in essence, there may not be an impact to the community, but in reality, what we're seeing is we know, as you know very well, that we have a major growing housing crisis. And we are losing not just, homes here and there, we're losing hundreds of year-round homes. So, I think that one of the great products that's come out of the Affordable Housing Trust has been the HPP, right? The Housing Production Plan that you guys are updating. It's fabulous news that you're updating it. And the data that goes into understanding what needs are on the island really come from the census. And so we went into the last version and pulled out some of the data that's behind some of the assumptions. So this is, this is the best information we have. We look backwards and we say, how many housing units do we have? How many are year round? And we realized that, oh my gosh, so from 2010 to 2018, which is the period we really have to work with, that's the most recent data, we grew, not surprisingly, from about 11,600 total housing units to 12,200 roughly, right? So we added about 600 units total. So we built units. So we know we've had a construction boom and we're building more housing units. But over the same period, the year-round homes and rentals has actually gone down by over 500. So what happened to those 1,100 homes, if you like? They became either seasonal homes or investor short-term rentals. And I know you guys are familiar with a lot of this data, but I feel like it is, it's sort of a little bit discouraging in a way, because it's not, we have to work on the affordable housing piece, but then we realize, okay, so we're losing a ton of year-round homes, some that are market homes effectively, right? And so when we look at projecting that trend, right? So we lost 500 in the last roughly 10 years, but really we know the pandemic's likely accelerated that issue. But if we just look at what we have and we project it out another 10 years out to 2030, over that 20-year period from 2010 to 2030, we would have lost 1,300 year-round homes. And if you think about how many people that's displacing, because we all know our population is actually growing. The census says we've only grew by 1,000 people in the last 10 years. We all know from data platform might be a little bit more than that, but let's assume it's only 1,000 people. So what does that really mean? It sort of means that we're stuck in like a game of musical chairs, where we're losing effectively one home a week, one year-round home a week. Oh, I apologize. I dropped my, hold on a second. Dropped my earbud. And at the same time, we're growing our population by 3 people. So that's an alarming trend that we have to work with at this point. And so what's the connection with short-term rentals of this housing issue, right? So what our research has shown us is that, really, we definitely have investors that are converting year-round homes into short-term rentals. And the numbers that I just showed you, when you look at it in a different context, in 2010, 36% of our whole housing stock was dedicated to year-round homes and rentals. And by 2018, we had lost 6% of the year-round stock. So we're losing it at a rapid rate. And what is it in practice? We're actually you guys are doing work to try to add more units. We've added Sachem's Pass, we've done Beach Plum, we've added the Covenant program, which was basically 100 Covenant homes in 20 years, but we really can't keep up with what we're losing. We're looking at going through all of this research, we find that there are clusters of short-term rentals forming in year-round neighborhoods. So you can look at Cable Lane, we can look at Maya Comet, and I'll give you some specific examples in a little bit. And we have developments that are popping up in what traditionally year-round neighborhoods off Bartlett Road, like Finback and Gray Lady. And we say, these are sort of designed as little mini resorts with smaller lots and would tend to be more affordable to year-round folks, but they're really not going into year-round homes, into year-round hands rather. Even in the mixed income 40B projects, you talk about, you're much more familiar with this than I am. We see that Beach Plum actually created more short-term rentals than affordable homes, actually than year-round homes. So, you take this as a context overall, and you say, the island is definitely becoming more of a sort of luxury resort type of place, and it's adding pressure to the year-round housing. Oh, sorry, I skipped one. So there are some neighborhoods that have already sort of transitioned from seasonal and investor, from year-round to seasonal and investor-owned short-term rentals, like Darrymore, for example. But then there are others, like Maya Comet, that are sort of midway through the transition. All of these examples on this page are homes that were owned by year-round families until sometime in the 2000s. And then they were sold to off-island owners and are now operated as short-term rentals at least part of the time. The house in the middle is actually on Swayze. And when it was purchased, until the time that it was purchased by off-island owners, it was not only a year-round home, but it was also 2 year-round rentals. So we lost 3 year-round homes effectively when we lost that house to off-island folks. Overall, we're seeing that some homes are being purchased from year-round residents and are being turned into short-term rentals, but largely kept unimproved. And you can look at the first 2 examples on this page are those types of examples. But then we also see other properties that are being, vastly improved to the point where they really won't be in year-round hands ever again. Another neighborhood that we explored is Tom Nevers West. And there, the transition from year-round to seasonal investor-owned short-term rentals is really just beginning. So all of these examples were lots that were purchased by year-round families who kept them until selling them just in the last few years. 2009, 2017, and then even 2019. So all 3 are now short-term rentals to some degree. If you look at the house on the right, this house was purchased, as an example, in 1985 by Year Round Home. The land was purchased for $125,000, and it was sold in 2019 for $1.4 million. It was actually sold to the head of a local nonprofit. So Year Round person bought it, right? We attracted a new head of nonprofit on the island. They bought a great house, and they sold it in 2020, actually just a few months ago, to off-island residents, and it's already registered as a short-term rental. So is this good for the island is a good question. Perhaps the better question to ask is whether business owners and residents are sort of better off than they were 10 years ago. And the reality is that the cost of the community from the massive loss of year-round housing has really been passed on to the year-round community. So, many of you are business owners, and that business owners are forced to either provide housing or subsidize rent to attract staff and then retain staff. Taxpayers are certainly subsidizing affordable housing, and I'm sure will continue to do so to support the efforts. But they're also subsidizing, major infrastructure, the landfill that keeps being a problem and certainly impacts the water quality in the environment. And then, of course, residents are paying through the roof if they purchased homes in the last 10 years or even beyond that. And if you're a renter, which we have a good subset of on the island, then you're literally, hopefully not, but you might be living paycheck to paycheck, and you may be maybe forced to live in cramped conditions. And then every new investor-owned short-term rental sort of demands more services that add sort of more pressure to housing and the whole infrastructure and environmental issues. So with sort of 80% of our short-term rentals owned by off-island owners and corporations, the reality is that any profits are really not staying on the island. And a lot of our research has focused on the impact on housing, and I know that that's what your group is focused on. But I don't want to minimize the other impacts as well. There's certainly a fairness issue with regards to B&Bs or inns, because if you're a high-intensive short-term rental, you're operating almost like a B&B, if you like, and you're not in a commercial zone, you're not paying the higher commercial property taxes, and you're certainly not regulated or licensed by the town like the B&Bs are. So the result is that, these are businesses operating in residential neighborhoods, and they absolutely are having an impact on neighborhoods. And in the past few months, I think that our group certainly, we've heard from a number of neighbors who have been severely affected for years, frankly. And so that's part of it is, addressing that issue as well. So as we went into, how do we craft a bylaw and a solution for this, we had several goals in mind. At the top of the list is protecting the ability for year-round residents to continue to short-term rent their home rather. And that means, whether it's a private room in your home, whether it's the back cottage, whether it's a garage apartment, it's a really big deal, we know, to residents to be able to, give them an edge when they're buying a home in the first place, and give them, a competitive edge. And then obviously affording your rent and affording the mortgage is a big deal. And it's, like I mentioned, it's also about offering neighborhoods protections against sort of the bad actors, if you like. And our goal was not and is not to turn the faucet off, but really just turn it down in a way that minimizes the impacts that are really severe on housing and neighborhoods on the island. We did a bunch of research on in other areas. Unfortunately, you can look to many other states and communities across the country and frankly across the world. For example, the ways to address the impacts of short-term rentals. The West Coast in particular, Hawaii and California have been leaders. And for New England and for Massachusetts specifically, it's really the Baker administration that's given the state's municipalities legislation in 2019 to start addressing this issue. And we're starting to see more and more Massachusetts municipalities looking at this. I listed a few in here. Boston is by far, Boston and the suburbs are big leaders in here. Boston has a hotel district. So they just decided that all that was going to be allowed was owner occupied. So residents, year-round residents can rent their own home. And then anything else is basically banned. So, it's, you know, it depends on the approach. And I think what you see overall is that cities have focused on protecting housing. And so basically banning investor owned has been a really easy, you know, thing to do. Like I said, they have hotel districts they can send tourists to and whatnot. When it comes to resorts, I think you see a much more varied and customized approach. I listed a number of examples in here, and I just wanted to mention like Sanibel and Captiva in Florida, for example. They have a 1-month minimum stay in residential areas. Virginia Beach says, you know, they banned investor-owned short-term rentals, and they have really strict occupancy requirements. Tahoe in California banned all short-term rentals in residential areas because they had somewhere to send the tourists. We've had several discussions over the last few months with the planning director in Kauai, and they actually, back in 2008, they grandfathered short-term rentals that had already been in operation in residential areas and then basically banned new ones. It's been interesting to understand what's been returned back into Islanders' hands there. Maui has a different approach. They have a cap on short-term rentals, and interestingly, this is actually the only example I found over the last few months, but they say if a new home is constructed, we won't issue you a short-term rental permit until 5 years after the home has been built. So what kind of tools does Nantucket have? And that relates back to the Baker administration's legislation from 2019. But really, Massachusetts has a great framework for local regulations. And it's anywhere from bans and caps to limitations on duration and frequency of short-term rentals, the occupancy requirements, to additional taxing schemes even beyond the lodging tax, like the community impact fee, to insurance and permitting requirements and fees, and record keeping requirements. And so, as you know, we put forward a bylaw for voters to consider at the next town meeting. And really what we're saying is, you know, the definition of a short-term rental is in line with what the state's definition is, which is any stay under 30 days. So any stay over 30 days would not be impacted by any of what we're talking about here. And what we're proposing is 2 different permits. The question is the unit a Nantucket resident's home? And if it is, we're saying that home would be able to be short-term rented up to 13 weeks, 90 days. While if it's a non-resident home, it would get half of that. So a little over 6 weeks or 45 days total over a year. It's kind of a cumulative thing. We also proposing a 1-week minimum stay, and this is really more to address the neighborhoods that are severely impacted by the high turnover. And we have other, you know, parts to the bylaw, including occupancy requirements, you know, that wouldn't go beyond 2 people per bedroom or your Title V, for example. And so that's the end of my presentation. I know that Tobias wanted to share some thoughts, but I'm happy to entertain questions before we go to Tobias. Or Tobias, if you'd like to go ahead, I'll leave it up to the chair.
Yeah,
Tobias, why don't you continue with your thoughts, and then we'll work our way through.
Yeah, you know, I'm happy to, you know, also everybody can go, and I just kind of had some closing thoughts for everyone as well. You know, I've been very engaged in this, you know, issue of affordable housing, and it's really great to see how far everyone has come with Neighborhood First. And we're now not just talking about the shy list, we're kind of talking a little bit more as a community about long-term, you know, what do we want for our community? So I'd love to hear some feedbacks from the members of the committee and then, you know, resonate with them.
Thank you, Tobias. So let's open to the board for board commentary. I'll look to each person by a show of hands for who has questions. Penny, I just saw you take your microphone off. Do you want to start?
Sure. I just have a couple of comments and questions for Julia. If the number of year-round units is decreasing, and yet the year-round population is growing. Where are these people living?
That's a good question. I think one of the trends that we've seen, in particular, like the data platform study that was done for the Affordable Housing Trust, I think highlighted the fact that people were moving into sort of higher, so moving into other people's homes. So instead of, you know, me living with my boyfriend, I'm moving in, let's say, with my parents, or I'm moving in to a friend's home, and we're sort of like cramming a little bit, but we're making it work. I think that that's been one trend, but I don't have the explanation of all of the, I don't think we have strong data related to that. I think it's more related to surveys and whatnot.
Yeah. So just as a follow-up to that, when we talk about homes that were previously occupied year-round, I think what's lost in this discussion so far is that many of the people who chose to sell those properties did so for a variety of reasons, often ending up moving off island. Nobody's forcing these people to sell. Okay, that's one thing. And then secondly,
Absolutely.
I just think you need to be really careful when you're talking about rental properties owned by businesses, because a lot of people hold title to their properties in LLCs. And if you're construing those as businesses, I think that's not accurate. The Copley Group, since you've called them out, they have less than 0.01% of these 2,200 registered rentals. So that's all. I just think you have to be careful about misleading people. And then the last thing I want to say is that when you say people have multiple properties, it'd be interesting to know what percentage of those are people that own a main house and a cottage or an accessory dwelling unit on one property? Because I think that's often what we deal with. Thank you. That's it for me.
Thank you, Penny. Liza, I did see you, but I'm going to work my way through the board first. Julia, do you want to answer this, or do you want to take everything?
I think that, yeah. I think if it's okay, can I take them as we go, because it might be a long list at the end. So Penny, you make a good point on the LLCs. So how we judge whether it's an investor owned or a business, right? Short-term rental is not because it's an LLC, because we all know that if you short-term rent your home for 2 weeks, or even if you're a year-round person and you short-term rent, your lawyers and accountants are likely to say, put it in particular, your lawyer is likely to say, put it in an LLC, because it's going to give you liability protection if somebody falls and breaks an ankle on your property, right? So that's not the way we would judge that. The way we look at it is the home available, let's say, to an extent where it's not really being lived in. Okay, so if the home is available for 200 days out of 365, let's say, if it's available for 40 days and it's only rented for a couple of weeks. So I think that, you know, what we've done is we've pulled out like the AirDNA data and some of this interesting information that, you know, there's a lot of data scraping over short-term rental listings and whatnot. You can get some pretty interesting data on how much a property is rented, what's the number of days available a year, and that's how we judge it. It's the intensity of the short-term rental, not whether it's in an LLC, I'd say. And on the multi-property, that's a good point. And I'll actually have to get back to you because we do have the information. And I agree with you that multiple properties, I don't believe, but I want to verify, is not being, it's not assumed as multiple units on the same property. But let me come back to you after this meeting on that.
That would be good to know. And I actually, I just thought of one more question, which is, your article is predicated largely on what you're calling a commercial use in a residential district. Why don't you change the zoning? The definition of residential. If you don't want people renting.
So in what sense?
Well, I think right now in residential districts, we're allowed to rent homes. Don't we have all the rights of ownership except out of disposition?
Well, that's a very good question. We're not allowed to have transient accommodation, just like we're certainly not allowed to have timeshares.
Is that in the
So
zoning code?
Mhm.
Okay, thank you. That's all I have. Thanks.
Thanks, Penny. Opening to other members of the board. Yes, Allison?
I just want to say, I really appreciate all of this. I really appreciate the presentation. I grew up here, and the number of homes that I've seen over the past, 36 years that were family homes, and I could tell you who lived there in 1990 and 1999, that now I drive by all the time and nobody lives in them anymore. And I'm always very vocal about the fact that I can't buy a house here. My husband and I don't make enough money to compete in this market. We never have. Hopefully we will, unsure when. So I really appreciate this coming out to the forefront. It's just one of the many reasons it's really challenging to become a homeowner. But we all know that an administrator in a private school and a firefighter can't compete with people coming from other states with their incomes and buying houses kind of from under us. So I really appreciate the presentation and putting it out there so clearly.
Thank you.
Great. Brooke? Brooke Moore?
Yeah, hi. I needed to click a couple of times. Thanks, Julia. I have one question for you, and you don't need to answer me today, but we are considering, as we look for a stable stream of income for the Affordable Housing Trust at the short-term rental tax. And so I would be curious if you've done an analysis on what this bylaw would do in terms of reducing the STR revenue. That is one of the things that the community has identified as a funding source for us to solve the backlog of affordable housing need. So, are we? To me, it's a balance of, will this have enough positive impact on reducing the flow of properties from year-round to short-term rental usage to balance with the corresponding reduction in STR revenue, if that's the funding we're being expected to use to solve the affordable housing crisis. So it's part of a picture, a puzzle that I need to put together. I happen to live in a neighborhood that is turning over rapidly. So this is very interesting to me from a personal level. And I wanted to, there was something else I was gonna say through you, Mr. No, anyway, it'll come up at a future meeting. Thank you, I appreciate it.
Thanks, Brooke. So I think we'll hold on that. Rima or Julia, she said we'll pass that to later.
Oh, I can answer that right now if you'd like.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah. So I think I know you guys are talking about the short-term rental tax, and I understand it makes complete sense that you guys need to find a funding source is the bottom line. And as you know, I used to work in the budget office in town, so I'm familiar with, on an annual basis, we have regular transfers that go to the Human Health Services. We have, we dedicate $500,000 every year. It doesn't, with no questions asked. So we need to build that in, right, to the budget for you guys, for the Affordable Housing Trust. I would be wary of tying it to a fluctuating funding source like local receipts directly. If you think about the budget, right? If you think about the police, for example, we do not say, hey, we're going to pay for the parking cop with the parking ticket revenue. Because if we did that every year, we'd have to ask ourselves, do we have enough money? Are we going to have enough money? Are we going to issue enough tickets? What we do is we have, 85% of our budget is property taxes. 15% is local receipts, meals, rooms, motor excise. And we roughly together, we can sort of say, okay, we can afford X, Y, Z, right? And I think that the Affordable Housing Trust has to fit in that pie. My other concern with tying it to the short-term rental tax directly is that it's effectively creating an unhealthy dependency. So what I think, Brooke, you sort of started on that, where you say, you know, so we're trying to fix an evil that's being caused by partly by investor-owned short-term rentals. But if we tie the funding of the solution to that activity, we're effectively going to promote it down the road. So there's this dependency that is likely not a healthy one. And personally, I would say convincing the select board to, you know, maybe even in the nearer term, if it happens to be free cash, because we've had some windfalls from short-term rental tax, and over time it has to be built into the budget.
Great, thank you, Julia. Open to more board questions, Rima?
Yeah, I just had a question about the residential exemption portion. Is that only on a home that is occupied, you know, or property that's occupied by a Nantucket resident? So, you know, you could do your second dwelling as a short-term rental, or if you owned property that you didn't live in, would you be exempt on that property as a Nantucket resident from being able to do short-term on the other property?
Thank you, Rima. So through the chair, that the answer is, so if the home is a Nantucket residence home, okay? So if it's let's say your property, you live on the property and you have a secondary dwelling, all of that on your property would be a Nantucket residence home, okay? If it's a different property that you own where no year-rounder lives, then theoretically what we're suggesting is that would be capped at 45 days. And I think part of the rationale, frankly, there aren't 25 ways to slice this. Okay, we can't regulate the way that we can't regulate who buys a home, right? We can only regulate the way it's being used. And you know, at the end of the day, what we're trying to do is protect year-round neighborhoods and year-round homes. And if we, you know, you can imagine a scenario where if we said, you know, if you're a Nantucket person, you're a Nantucket resident, and you want to own 10 homes, you can short-term rent those as much as you want. Every off-island person would just find a Nantucket resident and pair up with them and create a, you know, we'd have a problem. I want to make it clear though that, you know, I think my letter to the editor last week was pretty upfront about saying that we are open to some changes that would protect year-round residents. It is absolutely a priority and has to continue to be.
Great, thank you, Julia. More board questions? Seeing no board members, I have a couple of questions. When you identified the 370 houses were business owned, do you have a breakdown on how many businesses own those 370? To Penny's point, that the Copley Group represented such a small portion. Are those 50 owners? Are those 200 owners?
I don't have that answer off the top of my head, but so just so I'm clear with you, we did not identify those 370. The state actually pre-identifies them because they ask as part of your, right, as part of your DRR registration, they say, you know, they effectively cross-check if you own multiple, right?
Yep, I understand that.
What information I do have on that is that it's a very small number of island-owned homes that are in there, or year-rounders who own any of those properties. So it's by large off-island owners, but if you'd like the breakdown of the exact breakdown, I can certainly show you. Of the most recent registry. I know you have an older copy.
At some point in the future, that'd be great. Okay. My two bigger questions are, if an article like this passes, the free market will have to reprice itself, and that will effectively reprice assessed values of homes on the island. So the existing year-round homeowners price value will adjust based on who they're able to sell it to or what their use would be. So it'll change the assessed value, thus the tax revenue the town will generate. Has that been calculated or considered on, you know, some variables on what fluctuation that's going to look like? Is there going to be a 20% reduction island-wide in, you know, revenue receipts, or what does that look like? Is one question, and I'll do my second one next. There's a significant number of businesses on island that really make their profit after the summer ends, right? The summer's really about paying for goods and rent and utilities and et cetera. And the profitable period of time happens September, October, November, whether it's a caterer, a restaurant, bike rentals, you know, sandwich shops, across the board, no matter what it is. The reduction of available room nights, we'll call them, because that's what we're effectively talking about. And, you know, vacation dollars spent on the island, has that consideration for those business owners come in, and then any revenue that they generate? I know that you talked about a fair playing field for the hotels and bed and breakfasts, but do you have occupancy rate information for September and October from that group to understand, can they absorb demand of what would come out of available room nights through short-term vacation rentals? So those are my questions.
Thank you, Brian. The first one is an easier one for me to answer. So the impact to the tax, to the property tax revenue is effectively, if I'm understanding it correctly, there really would be no impact. Okay, so if you think about it differently, what the town is allowed to collect under Proposition 2.5 will be the same number. I'll give you an example, like a theoretical example. Whether we have 20 houses and they're each worth $10, or we have 200 houses and they're worth $100, what they can collect is the same. And so, for example, this is a bad analogy for this example, but in a bad year, like we had some pretty bad years in 2009, 10 real estate wise, and our assessed values definitely did go down, but the revenue that the town collects doesn't change. It continues to grow at 2.5% every year. So there would be no impact to that. Does that answer your question?
So it's kind of a roundabout way of answering that. The revenue number stays the same, but the burden on who's paying it will have to be adjusted, is my point. So if we're, and you know, I'll make the numbers up. If we're collecting $75 million a year, you're saying we're still going to collect $75 million a year. But my point is, who is going to provide that 75? Who will bear the cost? Because the year-round homeowner who has a home assessed at $1.5 million now, it may not be worth $1.5 million any longer. It may be worth less because.
Maybe I'll take that, Julia, if you don't mind. So I think it's important here to realize, you know, ultimately, I think the Affordable Housing Trust Fund's conversation should be about affordable housing and what we can do to address that issue. That's the real role of the Affordable Housing Trust. In a larger scale, you know, the town has done a number of things to, you know, increase the residential exemption from 20% to 25%. There's some flexibility to go up to 30% if they wanted to. They've done some shifting versus commercial versus residential taxes. Ultimately, currently about, you know, 85% of property taxes are paid for by investors and summer home owners, and that trend is continuing. So ultimately, if there were a real change in how property taxes were allocated, they'd still be significantly low for year-rounders. And I think ultimately, when you kind of have this conversation about, you know, how does it affect the greater market, you know, I'd look at people like Allie and say, hey, Allie, you know, 10 years ago, when you looked at the potential of buying a house, you might have had a shot, but now because of short-term rentals have come in over the last, 10, 15 years, they've really raised the ceiling or raised the floor for year-rounders trying to participate and buy a home.
What about the year-rounder trying to sell a home?
I think ultimately, there's a very strong market and it shouldn't be a problem for a year-rounder to sell a home, considering their values have increased significantly already. And again, I would say that the role of the Affordable Housing Trust Fund should be about encouraging year-round people to have homes versus other objectives or concerns that the town might have or the community might have. And I think what we're looking to do as Act Now, and I know I am, going back to 2012, when you look back at the housing needs assessment and you say, wow, look at the year-round housing stock we lost. And if Julia can go back to that trend going forward, we're going to continue to lose more and more of our community. And so ultimately, if we want to address, some of the issues the Affordable Housing Trust Fund is talking about, not just low income, but middle income, we need to have a carrot and a stick approach. And just focusing on getting more funding isn't going to get us where we need to go. Brian, you mentioned earlier in the meeting, or Tucker did, talking about, if you want to do a mortgage buy down program, it's about $100,000 per property, and that's about $10 million will get you 100 homes. Well, if we look at the 600 properties we've lost that were year round and moved to investor owned or summer properties, we just lost, $500-600 million worth of year round or affordable housing, however you'd like to quantify it. And we need to be aware of the real serious impacts that are going to take place going forward if we don't do anything about that. Lastly, I just had as a general thought for everybody on the board, this is the number. Anybody guess what this number is? $7 million. And it's two numbers together. One is $4 million a year. That's the amount of money the town spends on roads. Just roads. That's Victor's annual contract. The other $3 million is for repaving Lover's Lane, which has 3 new pools on it. So the town is already subsidizing short-term rentals, and it's about time we re-even the scales a little bit.
Thank you. Does any members of the board? Are there any members of staff that have a question? I'll open to the general public. Liz, I know you had your hand up early on. Did you have a comment or a question you wanted to make?
I do. Hi, I'm Liza. I am here. My friend Anna Day asked me to join in, and before I start saying what I was going to say, I raised my hand because when Penny asked where everyone's living, they're living illegally. And I have lived in places that should not have been rented multiple times. So that's maybe where they are. Anyways, so I wrote a little spiel because I care. I grew up on Nantucket. My family moved there in 1996 when I was in 7th grade. And I have been on and off the island. I went to college, I came back, I lived there for years. I taught abroad, I came back, but some of you might recognize me. I've lived there for a while. I'm a puppeteer. And I just wanted to tell you that a little bit about my housing experience, because I'm the prime example of someone who grew up on the island, and I have PTSD from housing crisis. It's like the amount of times that I have lost housing and have just thought about moving off island or not known what to do it's unbelievable. And I feel like a lot of times it's really important that these meetings happen and that everyone's talking about things and things are going on, and you can carry on as much as possible, but talking to the people that need the housing is very important, because it's a very different situation than saying, where do we put the taxes and what do we do with this? Because we are humans, and I am a very lucky human. I did the shuffle for years and lived in, probably 12 places in 6 years or something like that. And then I found that place, actually, it's that Swayze house that sold. And I can see both sides of everything. I'll say I lived there for over 5 years. I loved my landlords. We were great friends. They lived above me. And then life handed them, they didn't expect to have twin children and life really flipped around for them. So they ended up selling, which I didn't blame them for at all. And I had about 3 months to find a place to live. 3 months, 6 months really. And luckily I grew up on the island. So someone I went to high school with was like, oh, look at that. You have a place to live now because I know you can move right in, here you go. And if I hadn't grown up there, there's no way I would have found a place in time. Also, and they sold Swayze for a short-term rental. I don't think they were like, hey, let's do this intentionally. They were like, this person wants to pay us a bunch of money. Of course, take it. And I'm really sharing the story because I have lived in illegal places without floors and no walls. And I am a member of the community. I love Nantucket and I don't plan on going anywhere. But with the way I work and what my role in the community is, there's no way. I mean, I don't even think about buying a house at this point. I think about, okay, hopefully I've got this steady housing for as long as I can. And I'm sharing it because I just think that considering and talking to and getting down with the people who don't have anywhere to go. And I totally agree that if it keeps going the way it's going, I'm going to move off island or become a famous children's television star, whichever one happens first. I don't know. But so, and I don't blame the people. You can't tell people who live off island that want to invest in Nantucket not to do it. And I don't blame them for doing it. It's a smart decision on their financial behalf. And everyone has their own story too. That's the point with Chris Carey selling Swayze is you could look at it as like, oh, here's the number where Liza had to move out and they sold their house for a ton of money, but also situations happen and people are people. So considering every perspective and every point of view is very important. And I'm here because Anna asked me to be here, but also after listening to this whole meeting, I think that you could get some insight because if someone said, hey, I want to give you some money to help you pay for your rental, that's not what it is. It's outreach and it's community and it's connecting with everyone to know what it is you need personally, because it is so, so personal in every situation. And yeah, that's my little rant for you. So thanks for listening.
Awesome.
And if you want to ask me questions about my experience, that's fine, but you get the point.
I will say thank you for joining us, and I'll ask you to join us next week or in 2 weeks, and then again and again and again. It'd be great to have your input through the HPP process. So when we do have that meeting, in all seriousness, it'd be wonderful if you joined us so we could have your perspective in that. So thank you for joining today.
Yeah.
Are there other members of the public that have questions for the presenters? Seeing none, I think Tucker has one question and then we'll wrap up. Tucker?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I want to thank Liz as well for her input there. And I mainly, I don't have a question, but I really wanted to thank Act Now for being here today, Julian, Tobias, and initiating this discussion here. I mean, short-term rentals is kind of the Wild West. I don't know the right way to describe it. And, I just have a lot of respect for having difficult conversations and learning and educating and being a part of the solution. So I'm sure it's to be continued, but I wanted to thank them very much for being here today.
Great. Thank you, Tucker. And I will echo those comments. Thank you, Julia and Tobias, for joining us and bringing the conversation. And everybody who joined the meeting because of this topic, please continue to join. Come to the HPP, come to our next regularly scheduled meeting. We love input.
Great. Brian, thank you. Thank you
And
so
don't
much.
feel like you have to drop off now. We still have more exciting things to talk about.
Yeah, no, I know. I just wanted to say thank you to everyone here, and it's been a great discussion. And we would love, if you'd like to get into the data more and more. I know we worked a lot together on the Neighborhood First program, which the Affordable Housing Trust has been working diligently on for the last 2 years, and that put $20 million on the table. So it's nice to be part of the continuing conversation. And I think ultimately we're all here trying to make Nantucket work for everybody and have a sustainable year-round community. And I think right now as a community, we see a lot going on. There's discussions about how do we get money? How do we change this and that? And I think it's so important to remember that we're all working towards the same goal, which is how do we have a sustainable, thriving, year-round community where we can have puppeteers.
Thank you. We've still have a number of items to continue to work through. So I'm going to move us along. Again, thanks everybody. So we'll close the Act Now agenda item and we'll move to item number 9. It's a land bank article presentation and discussion. I do want to note before this opens that this is a private citizen article brought to us by a fellow board member, Brooke Moore. And so I would like to open this item for discussion and a presentation from Brooke.
Okay, thank you, Brian. In the vein of what Tucker said, that our community needs to have some challenging conversations in order to really address the long-term landscape for housing for year-rounders at all income levels. And in that vein, I made a decision with a group of about a dozen other Nantucketers to put forth a citizens warrant article that proposes to divert 1/4 of the land bank's current 2% funding stream to the Affordable Housing Trust for a period of 20 years. And the inspiration for this article is multifaceted, really, but it's mostly born out of the experience that we've had as advocates going to the State House to try to get what we've now referred to as the Housing Bank Bill through the legislature. And for members of the public who may not be aware, the process has been a warrant article at town meeting, a home rule petition that is then converted to a legislative proposal at the State House that must pass the legislature in order to institute an additional 0.5% transfer fee that functions along the lines of the land bank fee, but a little bit different. And the history of this is Nantucket has been trying to get this housing bank passed. I think it's 11 times since the land bank was created in 1983. A housing bank bill has been proposed to the legislature many, many times, including the last 4 years running. And I have been personally part of several teams of people who have gone to the legislature, testified in committee, gone to the craziest PAC fundraiser for the head for DeLeo, calling on our year-round people with political juice, seasonal people with political clout to make phone calls and write letters and have their lawyers. And we have advocated so hard for something that the community has been asking for a very long time. However, the reality is that has been a dead end for us, year after year after year. And there are powerful lobbying groups. There are political reasons why it's been a non-starter all these years. And it's been frustrating. And when we go, the general pushback we get, not only from the Massachusetts Board of Realtors that opposes anything that would appear to increase the price of a real estate transaction in any way, shape, or form, is you have a transfer fee in place. why are you not diverting a portion of that transfer fee? We would support that. Legislators, lobbyists, everyone we talk to up in Boston, our legislative delegation has advised this. Now, as housing advocates, we have been reluctant to take this route over the last number of years because we know it's a harder sell locally, right? It's a much harder sell on a local level because we're talking about taking a resource from one organization and sharing it with another organization. And that is the reality of what this article proposes. But I'm not afraid to bring this conversation to our community because we have been unable to achieve the goal of a steady funding stream for what is a building crisis. It's simmering, boiling, and now it's freaking boiling over. And I've been on this trust now for 4 years. And we have had amazing support with Neighborhood First and the CPC. However, $25 million in a real estate market where the median home price is in excess of $2 million is a good start, but it is a long way from a solution. And we can't get there without a steady funding stream that we can rely on for borrowing, that we don't have to go to town meeting every year. That for those of you who've been on this meeting, to give us some flexibility in terms of what we do, how we go about it, being able to offer a menu of options that meet the needs across the community. It's critical that we have an ongoing funding source. And I think Julia spoke to, I actually set up that question a little bit about the short-term rental tax, because that is a viable funding option, but it is not guaranteed. It is not known. It is not reliable. We can't borrow against it because it has to be allocated year by year by the select board. One select board cannot encumber the next select board with regard to that incoming fee. So basically it's a budget debate year on year, which makes the task of creating affordable housing, which takes years in the planning, impossible. So that's why I'm asking the community to have this conversation about how we can find a reliable funding stream for this trust to do the work that is long overdue. And frankly, Bill Klein, who was the father of the land bank, named back in the 1980s as an equal priority in the community to conservation. And I'm asking that we share a resource that has effectively helped conserve more than half of the Nantucket acreage in conservation, take 1/4 of it, leaving 3/4 to the land bank to continue their work. No one is looking to strip them of their revenue. It's a matter of a sharing, and that we can really get the job done. And this legislation contemplates a delayed implementation, a certification of the land bank's current debt and their ability to continue to service that debt. And it asks them not to undergo or take on any more debt that doesn't exceed their ability to pay it back based on 75% of the revenue over the next 20 years. And then it hands them back the 0.25% after 20 years. We're not asking for this in perpetuity. And so I think it's critical. This article will be filed with 125 signatures on Friday. I'm getting a great deal of support when I'm talking to people in the community. And I want our community to have this as part of one of the tools in the toolbox and along with what Act Now is doing, in order to finally have a comprehensive conversation about all of the tools we have available to us and how we accomplish the goals that this trust has worked so hard to set ourselves up to accomplish now and into the future. And so on that, I'll happy to take any questions or feedback or through you, Mr. Chair. Thanks.
Great. Thank you very much, Brooke. Dave Iverson.
First of all, Brooke, thank you for being brave and plodding forward under duress. I mean, I don't know what the right answer is here, but I think it's exciting that the discussion is happening, and whether the discussion ends up where we want it or not, I think that positive things will come out of it. And partnering with the land bank in some way, shape, or form is a very good thing. And I think what I like best about this article is the discussion. It's going to force the community to have the discussion. So thank you.
Great, thanks, Dave. Looking for hands of any other board members for comments, questions, thoughts. Rima?
Yeah, I am as citizen, I did sign this article. I do want this discussion to go forward, and I believe it's a viable solution to our funding problem, at least for 20 years. But my question, and I think this came up in discussion, is could it be transformed into something else at Beacon Hill? Could they morph it into something we don't want it to be, or will it stay as written as a home rule petition?
So through you,
Brooke,
Mr. Chair.
Yeah, go ahead. Thank you.
Is that okay?
Yes,
So
please.
the background here is before I even contemplated, well, as I was beginning to contemplate writing this article or proposing this article, I did reach out to our legislative delegation and had a meeting. I've had conversations with both Dylan Fernandez and Tom Dixon, his staff person here on Nantucket, about that question. And I want to point out that the land bank enabling legislation has already been amended 10 times since its inception. So there have been compelling reasons why the land bank has gone to Boston and asked for changes in its enabling legislation over the years. And so based on what I've heard from Dylan is that he has never seen a home rule petition amended to the degree that it would not look like the intended article that came off the floor of town meeting, and that he would be the legislative delegation if the town felt that, like, if somebody came out of Western Massachusetts and said, no, we think that instead you should divert it towards sewers or whatever. First of all, it wouldn't have been on the floor of town meeting, so it wouldn't be compliant with the intention of the article from town meeting. And the legislative delegation always has the option to pull the legislation if something unprecedented that they've never seen before were to happen. But I think it's important to understand that the risk of this has been undertaken already 10 times. I'm not sure it's a compelling argument not to try.
Allison, I see the
Yeah,
question.
I just want to say, just as a private citizen as well, I've been privy to the process of Brooke putting this warrant article together with the group. And I've just been in awe with the amount of work they've put into it to make sure it's really well-rounded, and it takes into consideration really just about anything that could come up, could be a conflict. They've done a really, really fantastic job, and I've kind of been a silent observer because I don't get into the emails very much. But it's a really strong, passionate group of housing advocates on Nantucket, and I've been really lucky to watch them work. It's really nice.
Thank you, Allison. Penny, I saw your hand go up.
Yeah, just through you to Brooke, a quick, just a comment, Brooke, which is you might want to find out specifically what those changes were. I think they were more procedural than substantive. Things like raising the minimum exemption for first-time home buyers, that type of thing, to the land bank enabling legislation. You just might want to check that.
The actual, the enabling document is available with all the amendments in their entire sections that are brand new
Are there?
over the years. Yep.
Thank you.
Including the ability to enter into contracts around the golf course
Ah,
was a piece
thank
of
you.
it. Yep. I actually have a marked up version that I'd be happy to share.
Are there other board members with comments or questions? Okay, seeing none, open to the general public. Tobias, I saw initially your hand was raised. Go ahead.
Great, thank you, Brian. I just wanted to say, one or just a couple comments as a citizen. One is I think it's important for the affordable house. I really want to see, ultimately, I want to see affordable housing be something that's not an issue in 20 years when I'm raising my kids. I would hope that's possible, but we'll see. We'll see if I can make any. But I think the thing I'd encourage the Affordable Housing Trust to focus on would be, home rule petitions take time. And I think as a community, if we're going to vote on something at town meeting, we can also ask our town administration to fund affordable housing appropriately. And so I would hope the Affordable Housing Trust Fund kind of takes a two-tiered approach in, whether or not the article passes. I think it's important that the Affordable Housing Trust Fund ask the town for a serious allocation of funds, a fixed amount, whether it's from free cash, et cetera. We should be funding housing like we fund roads. It's a very easy argument to make, and we shouldn't be, subsidizing investors via sewer or roads. And then lastly, I just wanted to say, as a member of Act Now, we do have a new speaker in the House. And, he seems to be much more in favor of affordable housing. And so I think the housing bank might have a better chance of passing this time around. And, Act Now is very supportive of helping the Affordable Housing Trust Fund in regards to the housing bank. So just wanted to say that. Looking to work with you guys more.
Great, thank you, Tobias. Are there other members of the general public? Questions, comments? By way of hands, I'll identify whoever. Yeah.
Megan,
Anne?
Megan has her hand up. If you see
Who
this.
does?
Megan.
Yeah, she's raising her hand with a little hand emoji.
Oh, okay. I called Anne as you spoke, so Anne, go ahead, and then Megan, I'll come back to you. How do I see the emoji? Sorry.
You have to click on participants down. If you go in the bottom panel, you see participants 19.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
Click on that and you can see on the very right, the panel will open up.
Got it. Okay, sorry, Anne, go ahead. Floor is yours.
Sure. Ann Cuspa, Housing Nantucket. Through Mr. Chair, what are the plans? Like, what is for the money? Like, do you have anything in mind on how the money would be spent? Just a little more clarity around that, please.
So, Brian, shall I take that?
Well, I think so. This is your article, so.
Okay, yeah. So the trust has had many conversations about how we have a short-term goal of maintaining safe harbor, getting to our 10%, getting out from under Chapter 40B. And in order to focus on that goal, our efforts are primarily in the rental arena because we can do multi-income properties and developments and have them all count on the subsidized housing inventory. So Fairgrounds Road, Tacoma Green, perfect example of that. What we're contemplating at Orange Street, what we might contemplate at Orange Street, all of that. However, we all know that there's a huge need in the middle market, sort of from the covenant buyer, including the covenant buyer, up to our allowable mandate of 200% AMI, I believe, under our enabling legislation. So the Ally Mitchell and Sean Mitchells of the world in the home ownership arena, which is not, it's not a good place for us to be spending time and money while we're in 40B jail, because only the units at 80% AMI in a home ownership scenario can count on the SHI list. So we've all talked about that. So I'm just clarifying this for folks from the public. You know, there's a huge gap in need that we haven't even been able to contemplate addressing while we're in 40B, under Chapter 40B, and focusing on rentals and SHI list, that will also require a great deal of money. And so ideas like community land trusts, where a trust owns the land value and leases it back to the homeowner on a long-term lease, which would be a significant subsidy per unit in exchange for a deed restriction for year-round ownership under 200% AMI. Down payment assistance for many of the covenant buyers who are not quite able to get there. Down payment assistance for people at that 151% to 200% AMI who have the wherewithal to do $1 million mortgage but can't come up with $100 grand for a down payment. So, and in addition, as Tucker talked about, you know, having the flexibility on a project like Orange Street to decide whether we want to provide a cash subsidy for the development of that property, because the land alone is not enough subsidy to bring that down with construction and ownership costs on Nantucket to affordable levels. Having the flexibility to do a local cash subsidy in order to structure that development at income levels that make the most sense for our community, as opposed to those dictated by LIHTC financing. So this is just a few examples of how this funding stream could be utilized. And I like to think of it as a menu of options. And as I talked about in the conversation about the finances, that having a financial resource allows us to be flexible in the marketplace of housing on Nantucket to create what's needed and respond to market conditions over time. And that's what is critical here. So there is no shortage of ways. And I also want to reassure the community that the Neighborhood First money, we have plans for that. And what goes on in real estate acquisition is you can't talk about them till the ink is dry. And so hopefully just in the next few weeks, we'll have more information for the community about that, because I do hear a lot about, wow, you guys got a bunch of money. Why don't you spend that first? And this is contemplating the next phase of funding that we need to keep the ball rolling and to address the needs that are as yet we can't even contemplate addressing without a steady funding stream. Long answer to a short question.
Thank you, Brooke. Megan, you had your hand up?
Sure, thank you very much. Can you hear me okay?
We can.
Excellent. First, I think it's wonderful that there's so much interest in affordable housing, and I commend everybody for their efforts going into this. I was just wondering, I did send this board an email on December 6th with a number of questions regarding this article. And I wasn't sure if anyone on this board received it or read it, as I haven't heard any reply. Well, sorry, I've heard one reply. So that would be my first question.
So I think the reply was sent by staff on behalf.
No.
Okay.
I haven't heard from staff at all.
Then I'm not sure.
So,
if you'd like to recirculate it to Tucker and Eleanor, then they can share it with us.
Absolutely, I can do that. And then, so I don't know, did you get a chance to read it, or have you seen it?
I'll have to search my email.
Okay.
Personally, I don't remember it, but
You don't. It was lengthy, but it did have a number of questions. So I won't go through all of those questions and take up the board's time now. I'll just recirculate that email, and you can maybe get back to me on those questions. My next question is the board backing this article as a board?
So this is a private citizen article. We have not as a board made a motion or moved anything forward with this. We do have a question out to town council as far as what is our role in that. I think there are individual members in their personal life who may be supporting it, but we're waiting to get a determination from town council whether we take a vote as a board or not.
Okay. And then my next question would be, where does this board feel funds would be cut from the land bank in order to receive the 25%? And why 25%? Is that just an arbitrary number, or there must be a reason to choose 25%?
So the board is not the proponent of this article. If you'd like to direct your question through me to Brooke, I'm happy to give her the floor to answer it.
Excellent. That would be great if you don't mind.
Absolutely.
Sure. Hi, Megan. Thanks for your question. The 25% number is based on the last average 5 years at $5 million a year, which is what my estimate is that we need to adequately solve this issue, and that it's going to take a significant investment, and this is on the order of $100 million. And while there are not, I don't contemplate concrete plans, that the decision on how that money would be spent would be determined by the trust should it pass. I have no doubt that the trust would find effective, efficient, and appropriate uses for that kind of funding in order to address the housing needs of the community.
Great. Thank you, Brooke.
Oh, and
Megan,
the other part of your question was where would the land bank? I would imagine, given my perusal of their finances, that it might impact acquisitions. And I posit the question of relative priorities in the community. The land bank's done a fabulous job and has been very effective in setting aside land for conservation. And we have yet to find the funding stream we need to address this. And I think public policy debate is about relative priorities, what resources are available, and how the community chooses to spend them based on those priorities. And so I'm literally asking the question of our community, has the housing crisis elevated to a priority level that asks the question, should this resource of the transfer fee be shared in order to continue to address the acquisition of conservation properties with 3/4 of that revenue stream, and shared with this really growing and escalating crisis of housing to address that additional community priority? And that's the conversation I'm hoping we're going to have.
Thank you, Brooke. Megan, did you have follow-up?
I've got quite a few, if that's all right.
Yeah, go ahead. Run through.
Excellent. So in terms of community priorities, I think it needs to be understood that the land bank isn't just about conservation lands, and that a lot of the properties the land bank owns does give back to the community at large. For example, some of the fundraisers that are done, say, at the Myacomet Golf Course, provide funding for the hospital's walk-in clinic to be open all year long, or provides funding for the only STEM playground on island, things like that. So I understand you feel that conservation's all set, but the land bank does more than just conservation lands. It gives back to the greater community in ways I don't think you or anybody knows about. I think those priorities need to be taken into account along with affordable housing. I would be really bummed out to know that, say, the Harvey Foundation couldn't run their fundraiser at the Myacomet Golf Course, or that the high school kids wouldn't get priority tea times for their sports, or that 40th Pole Beach wouldn't be open to the public, nor would porta potties be available because of a lack of funding, because the priority was given elsewhere. And so I think you need to look into everything the land bank does, not just think, oh, it's open space and dog trails. It's a lot more than that. And I highlighted a number of things the land bank does in the letter I sent out in December, because a lot of people don't know what the land bank does. It's not just conservation land. So that would be kind of my, I guess, comment on priorities. The next question, I don't know if this is a question for the trust or for Brooke as a citizen. How involved would the Affordable Housing Trust be in the land bank's affairs if you're considering taking on 25% of their revenue? Would you want to sit in at every meeting? Would you be overseeing what properties and things could happen? Would you be overseeing now employee salaries? Would you be overseeing, things like that? Because I do feel that this is quite a large overreach between the organizations. So is that something that the board has taken into consideration or Brooke has taken into consideration?
So through me to Brooke, the question is, do you see any involvement crossover between the boards other than just the funding?
Yeah, I mean, I assume you, for 25%, that the Affordable Housing Trust would somehow be involved with the land bank.
Let's not assume, and let's hear what Brooke has to say.
Okay.
Yeah, so I'm going to take your first question and be clear that the land bank's current operating budget is $5 million a year, and their average annual revenue over the last 5 years is $20 million. So there is no way that this article contemplates threatening any operations of land bank properties or anything that they're doing right now, not even close. We're talking about them retaining $15 million a year on average of revenue, which is 3 times their operating budget. So I just want to make that clear. That has been thought about and researched thoroughly. As far as integration between the Affordable Housing Trust and Land Bank boards, there would be none. This is a straight diversion of a portion of the revenue directly to the Affordable Housing Trust to be utilized as the Affordable Housing Trust sees fit. And the land bank would continue to operate as it does now with 3/4 of the revenue stream that it currently has. So there would be no operational interaction between the two boards. It's a direct diversion. So the money would come off the top of each transaction and be diverted to the Affordable Housing Trust in the same way that the Housing Bank bill contemplates the land bank, the collection of a housing bank fee and direction to the Affordable Housing Trust of that fee. This would be literally just a split stream of revenue to the two organizations with no operational interaction between the two. Now, the land bank and the Affordable Housing Trust have been having conversations about potential collaborations that meet the mission of both organizations. The challenge of that is that any money spent from the land bank side have to meet their mission, and their mission, there are opportunities for collaboration that have not moved forward, that have been presented to the land bank. However, this would leave both revenue streams unconstrained to each organization to pursue their separate missions.
Thank you, Brooke. Megan, did you have another follow-up?
Sure. So if I understand Brooke's $5 million operating, et cetera, would pulling 25% away from the land bank inhibit them from purchasing properties like the one actually on this agenda earlier, where they would be donating to the Affordable Housing Trust and providing the expense of moving the property? It concerns me that they wouldn't necessarily be able to do something like that and work with the Affordable Housing Trust and that type of collaboration. I don't think the job of the land bank is completely done. So I don't think that saying they're covering their operating expenses is necessarily the strongest argument for it, because I think there's always more the land bank can do under its own mission.
Through you, Mr. Chair,
Go ahead, Brooke.
I look forward to a healthy debate about this, and I would argue that moving a house from a land bank property is not the most efficient way to create affordable housing. I appreciate the shared interest, but it's not the land bank's mission. I appreciate their willingness to collaborate and cooperate on this level to a great degree. I mean, $5 million a year plus $10 million a year leaves a fair amount of money to continue in the acquisition effort, as well as a $15 million windfall over average this year in revenue. So.
Thank you, Brooke. I have a few other members of the public with hands raised. So Megan, I'm going to give a few other people an opportunity. Mr.
Wonderful.
Hoey?
Brian, may I just quickly say something?
Yes,
Just
go ahead,
to
Eleanor.
address Megan, the email that she sent was forwarded to the board on the December 7th. And so I just resent it, so Megan does not have to send it to me again.
Great.
So everyone
Thank you,
has it
Eleanor.
today and December 7th.
Great. Tucker, if you could hold on for 1 second, I just called Mr. Hoey.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Full disclosure, I was a member of the Neighborhood First Advisory Committee. Enjoyed that work very much. And I just wanted to not be an anonymous face on this call. I wanted to let you all know that I am fully in support of the petition, and my wife and I signed it, and I look forward to the debate at annual town meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hoey. Tucker?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just was going to add to what Eleanor relayed there. The email that Ms. Perry referenced had been forwarded to the board by Eleanor earlier in December. I think it might have not gotten response from the board because the letter itself is actually addressed to the select board, the land bank commissioners, and the trust. So it's a little unclear about who should be answering what in the course of the 4-page letter. So I guess I would say if Ms. Perry has questions specifically for the trust, if she could send those along, we will definitely share those with you.
Great, thank you, Tucker. Brooke, I'm just going to see if there's any other public or Renee.
Hi, everyone. I'm the director of the Nantucket Housing Authority, but I'm not speaking on behalf of the Housing Authority. I too signed the article as a private citizen. As a private citizen and having been in attendance in a lot of hearings about affordable housing, the discussion of using land bank funds, it's not new. It's been out there in conversation in the community, and we're only asking that we bring it now to a more official forum, and that is our town meeting form of government. And that's where it really deserves to be discussed. I think Megan's questions are fantastic and deserve to be answered. And I'm sure that we're going to hear many more. I think there's probably no one on this screen who doesn't think that the land bank has been doing a fantastic job. But as we keep putting more and more land into conservation, that's aggravating the problem. So it needs to be addressed. And I think that's really, I hope the trust supports maybe, I don't know what's best for this article, except it just needs to make it to town meeting floor so we can talk about it and get a sense of how the community feels. And we're not going to know that until it gets on town meeting floor. So I hope nothing obstructs its ability to get there. That is our most important form of government and where we have our loudest voice. Thank you.
Thank you, Renee. Are there any other questions? Megan, did you have one follow-up question?
Sure, if that's okay. It's not really a question. More so, do you want me to send another letter, or is the board comfortable reading the email that was directed to the select board, the land bank, and the Affordable Housing Trust? Because I did hear from select board members and land bank members. I just did not hear from this board that it was also addressed to.
Okay,
I don't want to make more work for Eleanor.
We can take the existing letter and we'll come back to you.
Okay, that sounds wonderful. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you for all the questions. I just want to make sure everybody had an opportunity to speak. Brooke, did you have any closing statement? Seeing you shake your head no, I think we're good on that presentation. Tucker, you'll come back to us after a conversation with town council as what role as a board we could take in either supporting the article or as individual citizens?
Yes, we have not heard from town council yet.
Okay, great, thank you. Just trying to get back to my agenda. Other business, we have a next meeting date of January 19th at 1 p.m. Is that a major issue for anybody on the board? Seeing none, we'll assume that's good. Item number 11, public comment for anything new that wasn't on the agenda. I'd like to open by a show of hands if the general public, if anybody has anything they'd like to. Oh, Marion, I'm sorry I just saw your window. Do you have an item you'd like to?
She's land bank.
Thanks. No, I just jumped in for Susan, who had to go to a 3 o'clock meeting.
Okay. I saw the, I'm sorry, I haven't been following the little hand thingies, like looking at people's faces.
But that's okay. No, I have no comments. Thank you.
Okay.
Brian, Megan's hand's raised again. I don't know whether she.
Okay. Okay, so Megan, is this under a new other business? Or
Yes,
new
sir.
Public comment?
It is, yes, sir.
Great, floor is yours.
I'm not sure necessarily if it's a affordable housing trust matter, but I think it's something that's important when you guys are looking at properties and humans living there. Mass DEP has offered up free PFAS testing for private wells. And for some reason, Nantucket was left off the list. However, they are trying very hard to put Nantucket on the list. So the more people that would like to have their wells tested, the better it is and the greater chance Nantucket has for getting their wells tested for free for PFAS. So I'm not sure if that's really affordable housing trust matter so much as you guys are involved with housing. I thought it would bring to your attention.
Can I ask you a question to clarify for me? So
absolutely.
We weren't on the list from the DEP, but you can still apply and get a free test.
Correct.
Okay.
And Angela Gallagher, who is at DEP, is working very hard to have Nantucket put back on. The reason Nantucket wasn't initially is because they look at communities that have 60% or greater homes that have private wells. Nantucket doesn't have a list providing how many private wells there are, but one can imagine there's a substantial amount. So Angela at DEP is trying very hard to have Nantucket be put on that list.
And if there's somebody from the general public watching that has a well they want to get tested, what should they Google first, or who should they call?
Absolutely. There's a website. If you give me just a second, I can tell you exactly what it is at DEP. So if you go to dep-pfas.madwpdep.org, I'm sure if you Google in Mass DEP drinking water program, you will be directed to links where you can submit your information and say that you would like to have your well tested. I know there's been a lot of people that have been signing up for it, and Angela is very excited because it only makes her job easier at the state level to get Nantucket on that list.
Awesome. Thank you for bringing
There's
that.
also on the town website, by the way, if you go to right on the homepage, there's a PFAS link and it's got a lot of stuff on it. And it's even PFAS at nantucket.gov. And I would imagine that would be another way to figure out about the free testing.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Thank you too.
Thank
Brooke, did you have a follow-up on that? You had raised your hand, but you're all set, Brooke? No.
No, I was going to ask where to go because I'm curious
Okay, great.
about getting my well tested.
Any more public comment? If anybody can help me with the little hands. I don't think I see any. I think everybody's covered.
None raised.
Okay, great. Close item 11, open number 12, board comments. Are there any board comments? Seeing none. Item number 13, looking for a motion.
Any?
Well, actually, I'm gonna recuse myself from the executive session.
Okay.
So I'm signing off now. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Penny.
Bye.
That's her way of getting out of doing it.
Yeah. Brooke, can we look to you to make the motion? We can't hear you.
You did, bro.
Is it on the agenda, Eleanor?
No, but last month we had the same issue and I read it aloud and then you just,
Okay, all right, go for it.
all right, hold on. Now I have to, oh, hold a sec. All right. The motion was made by A and seconded by B to go into executive session to consider the purchase, exchange, lease, or value of real property where an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the negotiating position of the public body and not return to open session.
Okay, so moved.
And is there a second?
Second,
Second from Dave. By roll, Rima Sherry,
Aye.
Dave Iverson,
aye.
Brooke Moore,
Aye.
and Brian Sullivan, aye.
What
And so-
happened to, we lost Allison. I knew we lost Penny.
So that's Allison, Penny, and Christie.
Okay. I didn't notice when Christy and Allison left. Darn it.
They just dropped off a second ago.
Okay.
So it's 3:41. Can we start up at 3:45? 4 minutes to stand up and shake your legs and get a drink of water?
Yeah, you use the other link, please.
Mailed
Okay.
by you? Is that the one emailed by you, Tucker?
Yeah, yes, I did it. I sent a calendar invite a little while ago.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Thank
Yep.
you.